Welcome to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise 25 Media. We feature top founders, executives, and business leaders from all over the world.
Chad Franzen here, co-host of the Top Business Leaders Show, where we feature CEOs, entrepreneurs, and top leaders in the business world. This episode is brought to you by Rise 25. We help B2B businesses reach their dream relationships and connect with more clients, referrals, and strategic partnerships, and get ROI through done-for-you podcasts. If you have a B2B business and want to build great relationships, there's no better way to do it than to profile the people and companies you admire on your very own podcast. To learn more, go to rise25.com or email us at support@rise25.com. Jonathan Heit is co-founder and global chief operating officer at Allison+Partners. During the past 20 plus years, he has played a role in all of the major milestones in the agency's growth, from 2 offices and 14 people to a global $100 million firm operating in more than 50 markets. In his current role as global COO, Jonathan focuses on harmonizing and rationalizing agency operations around the world, working closely with finance and HR to maximize the potential of the agency and by reducing friction, enhancing collaboration, and driving towards KPIs. He's also responsible for the internal communications, external marketing, and the agency's overall approach to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Hey, Jonathan, thanks so much for joining me today. How are you?
Thank you, Chad. I'm doing great. Appreciate your time.
Hey, so tell me about Allison+Partners and how it came about.
Sure. Allison+Partners was founded really out of originally the dot-com bust way back in 1999. You know, we had all worked together at a previous shop that was focused exclusively on that first wave of internet technology. And for some of your listeners that are a little older like me, remember those days when there were pink slip parties in San Francisco, and it was a lot of similarities to some of what we're seeing today in that technology market, sadly. But I think the fact that we are where we are today is indicative of how we built this thing to really be future proof. Really, our big learning out of that was that we never wanted to really be focused on one specific category. So again, we came from an agency that really focused on technology exclusively, so that if there is a dip in that market, you're completely exposed. We also looked at our geographical footprint and recognized that if we diversify that footprint, even from day one, as small as we were still 2 offices, right? So we always felt like if we have more than one geographical marketplace, again, if there's a dip and you start to build out globally, that other markets can make up for that. And that really was the philosophy. We saw a real hole in the market as well. When you think about in the marketing and communications landscape, you had these massive behemoths, very well known, owned by holding companies for the most part, pretty nameless, faceless types of organizations where they don't really, from our experience and folks who've come from that world to our agency, don't put the focus and emphasis on employee experience across the board the way we do. A lot of churn at junior staff. And then there are smaller, what you might call mom and pop shops that might be in one market, or might be, and many of these are really impressive shops focused on, again, one category, say entertainment or fashion. And for us, we felt like if we could be much more of a general firm, but be a mid-sized firm, that there was a lot of room to grow and a lot of room to be successful. And to date, fortunately, that's been the case for us.
What were the, you mentioned the circumstances under which the firm was kind of founded. What were the early days there like?
Well, we founded on September 1st, 2001, and we thought this was as bad as it was ever going to get, and it got about 20 times worse. We always like to say you learn a lot more from your challenges and your failures than you do from your successes. So those early days were quite difficult, but we were committed to maintaining the team we had. We were getting, notices from clients across the board that they weren't going to be able to continue with us. So we really launched in really one of the more difficult times, uh, frankly, in business history, I think, but certainly in ours. I think we learned a lot in terms of who we were as people and what we were committed to and what was important. Really made a lot of sacrifices in the early days, particularly Scott Allison and Andy Hardy Brown, who are two of my co-founders, and Scott Pansky as well. Really, in terms of some of the personal sacrifices made to make sure that the company could continue, as well as, again, really diversifying who we were and the type of work we did. I had a real background in technology, but not just the internet technologies that were becoming popular in the day, consumer technologies like Samsung and these sorts of things that are clients to this day. Other co-founders had experience in corporate social responsibility, in hospitality and travel, and consumer. And so we really said, let's diversify, let's focus, and let's get through these difficult times, and ultimately come out the other end stronger for it. I think the other side of that is lean on your people, right? We really worked with our teams to say, what do you want to work on? What role did you want to have in the future of this organization? And people really, really stepped up, were able to make their own sacrifices in terms of long-term opportunity. And several of those folks, amazingly, are still with us to this day.
You mentioned kind of learning from your mistakes. Those can often be, tough at the time, but a great way to kind of move forward. Was there kind of a big mistake? It was, 20 years ago, maybe when you guys first started, but is there a big mistake that you guys learned a lot from?
There's probably a book of big mistakes that we've learned from. I think when you think about your team, and I think one of the things that I think we learned early on was retention has always been very important to us. Team is very important to us in our business. That's our product at the end of the day, right? I mean, we're selling people's time. For the most part, we do more productization of our services and more digital platforms now than certainly we did 20 plus years ago. But it's still a big chunk of it is advisory services and consultancy. And if somebody's not the right fit, making that decision sooner and helping them find something where they could be more successful shouldn't be seen as a failure. But I think in those early days, it was, we're going to do everything we can to salvage this relationship. And there were people probably that we held on to too long that have gone on to do phenomenal things in their career, but we're struggling within our organization. Startup type of organization isn't right for everyone. And, so you act quickly, acting quickly on that, I think, was one of the learnings that I really profess to our teams to this day, even though we certainly are far from a startup at this time.
Tell me about your company's growth. As I mentioned, you went from 2 offices and 14 people, and now you're a global $100 million firm operating in more than 50 markets. Kind of take me through that and maybe some of the role that you played in it.
Yeah, when we started, we had, again, as I mentioned, came out of a predecessor agency that had core operations in New York, and we acquired the West Coast assets of that shop. So we were in San Francisco and Los Angeles. We quickly were able to expand into San Diego, where Scott Allison, our global CEO to this day, had roots, as did another co-founder of ours, Scott Pansky. And so we were really looking at, again, broadening our reach within California, and had a non-compete with New York as a market for 2 years. As we got through that first slog and really the doldrums of the early 2000s and really started to work our way out of that, we also saw New York as an opportunity. I'd come from that market. We really looked at what can we do there, because to really succeed as a communications agency, you have to be in the media capital of, if not the world, certainly the Americas. So we quickly set up shop there, had a few folks that were working there. I followed suit and brought my family back to New York early in our history. And I think that, having that expanse and then starting to look in other markets and being opportunistic, whether a client needed us in that market or we felt that was a strategic advantage for us to have boots on the ground, we, instead of just being, one central headquarters, I think again that approach of, again, in our business, because it is so events heavy, relationship heavy, having those locations in markets, I think was a differentiator for us. Even when we were only about 100 people, we might have had 6 or 8 offices, and then we followed that strategy globally as well. We wanted smaller offices with, connectivity amongst those people, but at scale becomes a large enough organization to really be able to work on whether it's government accounts within California at that time, or large technology businesses that might have had headquarters in New York or San Francisco, or large other companies that at the time might have been in some of the markets where we started in those early days. And I think again, that to us, that focus on people and connectivity, my role being, really, again, some of the larger accounts that we won early on. YouTube became a client early on in our technology practice. It ended up becoming our first $1 million account, and then understanding how to structure those and learning as we went on sort of what works and what didn't, I think was, again, part of what my role was. And I think part of what prepared me for the role that I play today.
Yeah, that role is a global COO. The world is kind of trying to come out of COVID. It's the working styles have changed a little bit, but people are returning to the office. How are you guys handling that? Throughout your markets, and how are you dealing with employee engagement?
Yeah, it's a constant vigil, right? And I am one of many of a great team of senior leaders throughout this organization. I mentioned a few of the co-founders by name, but there's a global board, and we would meet daily at the time when COVID first hit. I had relocated my family to Japan to be closer to our APAC offices. We have, as I mentioned, we've expanded into Asia Pacific and Europe over the last several years, and since then now into Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East. So we've got broad expanse, but again, being close and on the ground there helped me understand what the needs were within that individual marketplace. And we've really leaned on that, allowing the local leadership to make the right decisions. Obviously, what's happening in China in return to office, both during the height of COVID and today, is very different than what's happening in the UK or in Los Angeles. So our approach to that has been, let's listen to the people on the ground and then balance that with what we think makes sense. And so over the last year, we've implemented 2 days a week in the office. It's not for everyone. We lean office first in a hybrid mode. We still believe that the connectivity that you get from being next to someone in the office, we really believe that there is, especially in our business, where, as I mentioned earlier, it's a people business. So you've got to have those relationships. Training for junior folks, a lot of that has to happen in person. We've had one of our best years in history doing most of our work remotely. I do not dispute that we can do very well financially, fully remote. There is more to what we've built here, though, than financial gains and purely profit motives. We really are trying to build careers, build futures for people, and I think we've done a nice job of that. And we believe that comes from the interaction and the connectivity. We're starting to really look at it as return to connection as opposed to return to office, because the office is part of that connection. A lot of folks, we want to get folks out, go meet with your clients, right? If you spend a week in a market where your client is, that's as important as coming into the office, if not more so, right? If you're out on pitches, we've been doing a lot more of our pitches in person. So that return to connectivity, I'm seeing real value of it when I talk to people about it. I think it'll probably take a while for the world to catch up, and I think there will always be a place for fully remote ventures, and they're successful. It's just not the way we're structured. We don't believe it's right for the organization that we've built over the long haul.
What kind of inflationary pressure is there on services like yours, advisory services and consulting businesses, and how are you guys dealing with it?
It's not a unique question from the last one, right? I mean, I think where we see inflationary pressures are in our employees' pocketbooks, right? I mean, when they're thinking about what it costs for them to get into the office, what it costs for them to buy lunch when they come to the office, what it costs for that. So we're trying to match that with um, pay, equity, and salary considerations to make sure that they can, so that a raise doesn't become simply cost of living increase, so that we're able to make sure that they're well positioned and in a state of mind where they can truly be successful, right? I think then you're also getting that from the client side. Where the inflationary pressures on their business are causing, reductions in budgets or cuts, et cetera. And then lastly, really in just the cost of doing business, right? I mean, as I mentioned, we do maintain and operate dozens of offices around the world. So the cost of doing that has increased. The cost of healthcare has increased. The cost of everything has increased. So it's nothing we haven't been through before. It's certainly at a different level than it has been over the years. It's just something you really have to manage through. And we've always operated very lean, right, as an organization. And I think we've maintained that blue collar mentality of just roll your sleeves up and get the work done. So keeping some of those costs out of the system allow us to really invest in our most important assets, which is our people and the communities in which they serve.
You said earlier that you relocated your family to Japan. Did you personally have a lot of like global experiences moving around the globe throughout your life?
I have not. No, I did start in started our Los Angeles office. So I had moved from New York to Los Angeles. So I was used to uprooting and from a business sense, and I was traveling. Once we did expand globally, my colleague Andy Hardy Brown, our global vice chair, and really the one who developed the chief operating officer role originally, and taught me a lot about that, was had gone out to. He really was the driver of our global growth. He's not as much a client-facing leader as he is a people leader. He hired me at that predecessor agency. He hired Scott Allison at that predecessor agency, and many of the top leaders in this organization. So he had moved to Singapore previously and spent 3 years there helping to build out that network, acquired our China presence, our Japan presence, and really built Singapore from the ground up with some local teams. Our philosophy has always been, don't put an expat in to lead the office. Very different than a lot of large global agencies where we'll just put an Aussie in and they can run APAC. And it's a very different world. We have a great team in Australia, led by a solid local team. But we feel like if you don't have that local market insight, then what's the point, right? Again, you go remote and have somebody from the UK or the US or Australia lead that remotely. So for us, it was, let's get there. So I had been traveling there a ton, spending a lot of time in Singapore, spending a lot of time in Tokyo, in Beijing and Shanghai, where we have strong presence. So the idea was, once Andy had come back to the States, it was good to have one of the co-founders or global partners in that region. So I offered myself up to go out there. That'd be a great experience for myself and my family as well on a personal level. But also really to be close to the region, get to work with the teams there. And it really did pay dividends right away, as we had a change in leadership in our Singapore office. Although it's not around the corner, I at least was able to hop down there, a few times over the latter half of 2019 to work closely, find the right person to put in place, and continue to build relationships, which in that corner of the world, probably more than anywhere, those face-to-face relationships are essential. You can't really be successful if you don't have that. So no, I personally didn't have experience transferring to a different global region, but I had transferred into other markets before, and I had spent a lot of time in the region.
A few more questions for you. Who are some of your mentors, and maybe what is some of their best advice that you've received?
Yeah, I mean, again, I've been with the same crew now for over 20 years. So I've mentioned them by name now numerous times, but Andy and Scott really have been, incredible mentors to me, teaching me sort of some of what they've learned in spearheading this business as two dynamic leaders, a lot about mergers and acquisitions and this sort of thing. So I think that's been really informative to me, and I've been able to be very fortunate where my leadership is also a real mentor to me. And I think a lot of the maxims that I've shared now about learning more from our successes and dedicating our people. And I think the one last thing that I didn't sort of put in words, but I had referenced before is, revenue growth is a trailing indicator, right? That's how we look at it. If you start working towards a number and you're only thinking about that number and you're making every decision around that number, we have found that you'll end up making poor, short-sighted decisions. If you make decisions around long-term health of the business, infrastructure, smart investments, fail fast, think about your people first, invariably the revenue growth follows. So I think that really, to me, has been the lesson that I've taken away from the last 20 plus years.
One more question, but first, tell me how people can find out more about Allison+Partners.
Yeah, sure. We're in the middle of a rebrand, actually, as we speak. So some of our details may change as we evolve into our third decade here. But www.AllisonPR.com is our URL. You can find everything you need there about Allison. A quick search for Allison+Partners will find us, or I'm obviously on LinkedIn, and always happy to chat with folks about this industry or the work we do.
Great. Hey, last question. What are a few of maybe your some daily rituals that you find most important? What's on a typical day?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? I like to make sure when I wake up, if I can, and the weather's nice, get out for a run, get out, and if not, do some sort of exercise in the morning. Really sets my day right. I often find if I don't do that, my day is just not the same. I'm more sluggish, and I just don't quite have that sharpness that I might otherwise have. So I think you got to get moving. You got to get your body moving and get out there. Because just really everything obviously is interconnected. I also, if I'm coming into the city, I live up in North Jersey, so I've got about an hour commute on the train. I like to get on, clear out those emails, get particularly talking to my team in APAC, getting them addressed early. I'll do that whether I'm home or on the road. But also, it can't be all work. Certainly work put in long days, but I like to get, the New York Times crossword done in the morning, maybe a Wordle, something like that. A little wordplay kind of gets my brain moving in a different direction, or listening to a podcast, listening to a book on tape, or book on tape, Audible, or reading. I find that if you can, and I like to do that at night as well, because if you can get that part of your brain moving too, the same way you get your body moving, I find it really cuts across everything else. Everything else just seems to work better if I manage to do that. If it's a day where I wake up, get right online and spend 12 hours and I've done nothing but eat and focus on the day-to-day of the business, it's probably less effective than 8 hours of a day in that other routine.
Sure. Hey, Jonathan, it's been great to talk to you. Thank you so much for all of your insights and for your time today. Really appreciate it.
Chad. My pleasure. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So long, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Top Business Leaders Show, powered by Rise25. Visit rise25.com to check out more episodes of the show and to learn more about how you can start your own podcast.